Welcome everyone to Mailfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the X-Files Season 2 Episode 1. It's called Little Green Men. And let's not gloss over the fact that we're starting Season 2. That's fun, right? It's exciting to start a new season. It feels like we're on a new chapter. Feels like we get to do some new things. And I think especially in this era of TV shows, there's so many of these network long-running shows that often you find they don't find their footing until season 2, right? That is like a common feeling amongst a lot of shows from the 90s and 2000s where, for whatever reason, it's a case of like getting some confidence or maybe learning from the mistakes of actually producing a season of the show. Maybe it's the actors finding the characters better, the writers finding the characters better. But for whatever reason, there's a lot of series from this sort of era that really pick up and improve upon what they started with, and it's something that is changed significantly in how TV is made, where maybe the fact that, you know, because they have to pump out 22 or 24 episodes, was it, for season 1 of this show, in the span of a year or less, that, yeah, they're kind of learning on the go because they're moving so quickly, so season 2 just has to be stronger because of that. And I'm not saying season 2 of this show is definitely going to be stronger, but it's definitely something that was in my head as I was starting this, and I do think that this episode had some confidence. There was like an extra layer of confidence that it's not like a big thing. I'm not saying that it's like a night and day, the quality's jumped up dramatically, or even that this is better than every single episode in season 1. Not at all. But just there's a sense of importance that you feel right from the start of this episode. And yeah, maybe it helps that Mulder's doing kind of a philosophical discussion about the search for extraterrestrials as we're hearing about the Voyager, as leaving Earth and going out of the solar system, and the fact that music and information about the Earth was contained on it. It feels very kind of profound the way he's talking at the start of the episode. It's actually in the mood. And it does kind of feel like it makes the events of this episode feel like a big deal. That ties it into sort of real human history and kind of the idea of the exploration. But of course, this episode, more than anything, is a pretty important character episode for Mulder. Mainly because when we see him at the start of this episode, he is on a crappy surveillance duty. Because if you remember, the X-Files are done, right? They were decommissioned at the end of season 1. I suspect that won't be the case for long, because we're only in season 2 of the show. But to be fair, I did say in the finale that I wouldn't surprise me if they were back as the X-Files by the end of episode 1, and that is not the case. They are still technically just FBI agents on different things, and the X-Files itself has not been reinstated. Again, I suspect it won't be too long before they are, but hey, I mean, who knows? Hey, maybe we'll go all season. Maybe they won't be reinstated till the finale, for all I know. That said, I'm not sure how you do 20 plus episodes of them investigating stuff where they're having to dance around their other duties, because they're not doing this as their actual FBI duties anymore. It's extracurricular. It's extracurricular extraterrestrial activity. Like, sometimes you get a thought that you think's funny, you have to say it. That was one of those moments. So, yeah, anyway, so we meet Mulder, and he is on this crappy surveillance. He's clearly bored out of his mind. Later on in the episode, he clearly implies that this is just a waste of time, that he could have convicted the people he was listening to within a couple of days, but he's been doing this for months, and it's like the FBI are just intentionally keeping him busy with, well, busy work. They're just keeping him occupied with something so he's not doing anything else. So there's a really nice little joke. I say nice. I say it's nice because I actually saw this episode twice, because I took a week off last week, but that wasn't planned. I wasn't planning on taking a week off before starting the new season. It's the best time to take a week off, actually, is between seasons, because it's a nice natural breaking point where you get to miss it a little bit before we start the new season. But I had intended on just starting season 2 last week, and I watched the episode for it, but then I didn't get a chance to record, and then a couple of days passed, and it was like, okay, I'll just wait and I'll watch it again, and we'll do it for this week. So I actually caught something here that I didn't the first time, is that the surveillance that Mulder's doing, he's listening to these guys who are just kind of sleazeballs talking about strip clubs. And there's a stupid joke here where he mentions, do you remember Tuesday? And the other guy says, no, what happened on Tuesday? And he's like, no, that's the stripper's name, Tuesday. There's a payoff to that at the end of the episode when he's back in surveillance again, where someone says something about Wednesday, and he's like, oh, what was Wednesday like? What was she like? And he's like, no, the day Wednesday. They do like a flip at the end. I guess because I wasn't paying enough attention to what the surveillance voices were actually saying, because that's not the important part. Like, it's not important at all to the episode what this is. It's just background noise, really. But a minor chuckle was had when I realised they sort of did a callback at the end to the first dumb conversation. But, you know, we're introduced to this status quo where Mulder's doing the surveillance, Scully's doing stuff at the medical side. She's teaching, I think, students about autopsies and shit like that. She even has a little moment where she sort of loses herself and gets all philosophical, and her students notably say, "You're a little bit spooky there, Agent Scully," which makes her sort of like, "Oh, you're making me think of my partner, my old partner, bringing up emotions and feelings." But I think the big things that I really want to get into, there's a few key scenes early on here that are really worth talking about here. There's basically 3 of them in a row. So the setup to the first one is that Scully tries to say hello to Mulder in the FBI building, and he just pretends she doesn't exist. And it feels a bit cold. You're like, okay, what's going on here? And then they meet, like Deep Throat, at Watergate. And I'm not saying that Deep Throat ever met them at Watergate. Maybe he did, I don't remember. But, you know, Watergate, the phrase that the name Deep Throat comes, of course, from the whole investigation into the Watergate scandal. So there was just some heavy on the nose sort of stuff here. Obviously, it ends up acting as a nice little transition into a flashback / dream sequence, because Mulder looks at the Watergate sign, and then it goes back to the early 70s when that was going on, and that's kind of this link to this flashback. But this scene between Mulder and Scully, where Mulder's convinced that they're being watched, so they shouldn't be talking in public, so they're meeting in secret, they're meeting in the shadows, in the parking garage at the Watergate Hotel. And it really sets up here kind of the themes of what this episode is that Mulder, while he's not necessarily doubting that he's seen some stuff, he's very disillusioned by the fact that he has really nothing to show for it. He has no proof. Scully tries to talk him up a little bit and reminds him of the things that he's seen, but he's like, yeah, but all the things that I have seen, and I have nothing to back it up. And he compares it to the guy who built the largest telescope in the world, or at least it was up until recently, he says. That he said that an elf told him to do it. And, you know, the idea that he's worried that he's just been seeing elves this whole time, or, as he corrects Scully, little green men, which is where the title of the episode comes. Is this just all a figment? And it's funny because Mulder was so sure of everything he saw last season, like so frequently, that it is kind of almost distressing to see him like this. This episode is very much about reigniting his dedication, his passion for looking into this. It's not a surprise. They do a little neat thing here, actually, before this Mulder and Scully scene, where he's looking at a photo of his sister on his desk, which actually sets up the flashback, because then we can recognize her in the flashback. I do have a couple of questions about the flashback scene, though. Now, admittedly, it does end with Mulder waking up as if it's a dream. Now, movies and shows often do this with flashbacks, where they'll present them as if the character's remembering it as a dream, and they'll wake up from it. But the reason why I'm putting that out forward is because I'm going to talk about some discrepancies that I think I'm remembering from when he told the story of this in season 1. Because what we see here is him as a kid with his little sister, and it's when she's taken by aliens, right? And the scene's actually shot really well. I really like the lighting, especially the fact that there's like an orange light coming in the window that takes her away, and she floats out the window, but the light that's on the young Mulder's this blue light, so there's a really good contrast when it cuts between them. It really stands out. It really makes it feel like the the alien light is from a completely different source. Even though orange and blue is the most common light colors, that's like everything falls between those two spectrums in normal light conditions. So I thought this looked great, but from what I remember in season 1, and by all means the comments can correct me if I'm wrong in remembering this, but I recall him saying it was night and he was in bed and that he couldn't move when his sister was taken. Like, he could sense there was something there, but he couldn't move, like he was paralyzed. That's not quite what happens here. He actually does kind of like jump up and reach for the gun that's on top of the closet. He does freeze with fear a little bit, but it doesn't sound like what he talked about before. And then that's the other thing, is that I was sure, like, when he described it, it was like they were both in bed and they came whilst they were sleeping. Again, they were up playing a game, they were arguing about what was on the TV. So that's felt there were some differences, but again, you could argue that this is just changing because it's a dream version of it, it's an alternate version of it. It could just be a mistake, or they've decided to kind of fudge the details a bit because they thought of a more interesting visual to do with it. It's not a big deal either way, but it definitely, in my head, I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I remember these details from what he described as being a little bit different than this. But, you know, regardless, I think it's neat in an episode where you're sort of exploring this idea that maybe he's losing his faith in what he was always fighting for and all the truth that he was always looking for, to go back to what the origin of it was in the first place with this flashback. And then, of course, the rest of the episode being about him finding another experience that reignites the passion, if you will, and the determination. So, yeah, I thought, like, this was a fun shot scene. I thought the scene with Mulder and Scully was very good. It really played off their building relationship throughout all of season 1. That happens again by the end of the episode as well. I'll get to that in a bit, but I think the chemistry there and her genuinely just being worried about him, because he assumes that she's there because she's got information for him, and she's like, no, I'm worried about you. You're acting strange, right? Like, I'm concerned about your well-being. We have to talk. What's going on? And then he gets in about all his disillusionment recently and all that stuff. So, but then the big scene that gets him on his path, where Government Dude, who's an actor I recognize from the crappy horror movie Valentine of all things, although I'm sure I've seen him in other things, he's just the guy that drives him to this new prominent character that we're dealing with here. What's his name here? Senator Matheson, who we never saw in season 1. Maybe he was mentioned and I don't remember it. That's possible, but I think this is a pretty new to the audience thing, although notably Mulder says, I know I failed you, implying that they have had interactions in the past, and certainly, you know, he's not surprised by who he's talking to, so it does seem like he's supported Mulder and given him some nudges before. If I'm misremembering something, or if maybe this character was played by a different actor in season 1, and maybe that's why I'm not remembering anything, feel free, but this seems like we're being shown a character who was already in play that we had yet to be privy to as the audience. And sure enough, he's playing the Bach music that's on the Voyager, and that kind of leads into what we're talking about. In fact, what I didn't mention about the opening, because the cold open to this episode is fantastic. It's, you know, it's Mulder talking about the Voyager and explaining it, and then going into, oh, the X-Files has been cancelled, so they've taken away all my tools. And we see this tape recorder at this little science outpost turn on, and the message and music from the Voyager is playing as if someone's beaming it back, and then it goes into the X-Files title music. That was a great little cold open. It really set things up, so it was really exciting to come back here, and then this senator starts talking about the Voyager, and you're like, oh, okay, he's going to tell Mulder that this has happened, or he's going to send him in that direction. And sure enough, they talk under the music so they can't be heard. And he's like, hey, I'll stall anyone else who's going there for 24 hours, but the research station in Puerto Rico has picked up something. You're looking for contact. There's something there. Go check it out. But he does warn them that this team that's going there, these like marine dudes, like they will shoot you on sight if they see you there. So you better get in and get out. So Mulder just ditches whatever he's been doing and he just goes there. And immediately Scully's seemingly questioned about where he is, and she doesn't know. In fact, she's worried, and that's something that Skinner says. Skinner, because he's the smoking man's there listening to the recording of when he asked Scully about this, and he says Scully doesn't know, and the smoking man's like, well, how can you be so sure? And Skinner responds with, because she's concerned. She's worried about him. So she's going to go look for him, and we're going to pay attention to her. So Scully's plot of this episode is basically getting to Mulder, is finding where Mulder is. Whereas Mulder is on the way to Puerto Rico, and it's his little adventure when he gets to this research station. I think the scene with the senator was very interesting. It kind of felt like there is someone high up backing Mulder, and it's probably going to lead to how the X-Files gets reopened soon. I imagine will be this character. It seems like he's got power. Not enough to stop him from being shut down, but certainly I imagine he will be instrumental in bringing it back. But I think what I really liked about this episode is that even if you've never seen season 1, although certainly the character dynamics between Mulder and Scully are better if you have, is that it sets up a simple thing. The Voyager went out with all this information, and then one day, recently, it started beaming back, and Mulder has to go and find it. And there's government forces that want to catch this, that want to stop him, that want to sweep it under the rug, whatever it may be. And I think the goal is clearly defined. It's an exciting goal, because it might literally just be proof that there's contact that Mulder can have. Because, like we said, Mulder's whole thing is that I have nothing to show for this. I have no hard evidence. Despite all the things that I have witnessed, there's never been anything lasting from it. This potentially could be that. Obviously, it's very bittersweet at the end of the episode when he has nothing again, but that is the goal. The goal is simple, and it's almost like he's going out there to find the evidence to have that finally, but also to kind of just confirm to himself that he's not been crazy this whole time based on what he set up in this episode. So yeah, he goes out there. He finds there's a guy named Jorge who's hiding because he thinks he's seen an alien, and draws the alien on the wall. Mulder monologues a lot into the tape recorder. The tape recorder starts playing stuff back from the Voyager mission, and then this high pitched noise plays. And Jorge gets scared, runs out into the forest, and Mulder finds him dead, like he's been scared to death, like he's frozen stiff with his hands up, looking all petrified. And Mulder drags him back to the station. This is all just kind of the details of it. Ultimately, Mulder has a close encounter. He sees what appears to be an alien. There's this bright light from outside, and it looks like an alien silhouette at the doorframe. And we don't really know what happens next. Mulder presumably passes out. And it's one of the questions I had at the end of this episode, is exactly what the alien was doing there, why it came, and did it do anything to Mulder? Did it even care that Mulder was there? I mean, if they killed Jorge, who saw them, then why not kill Mulder? Or is the suggestion that they didn't really intentionally kill Jorge, it's just that Jorge was so scared that he just died? Even though I don't think you can literally just die frozen in fear like that, but that would suggest to me some paranormal activity from the alien that caused that. Is it because Mulder, because he's almost excited to see them, he's not scared in the same way that Jorge was? I'm sure he's nervous, because, it's pretty, it's spooky, for lack of a better term. But, maybe I don't know. I actually don't have an explanation necessarily for why they didn't do to Mulder what they did to Jorge, unless they didn't intentionally do that to Jorge. And the fact that Mulder is just kind of braced because he wants to see them, it didn't affect him in the same way. But, he wakes up, Scully wakes him up. Scully's there by that point and wakes him up in the morning. But yeah, the big thing is that this information's been beamed back. I think at one point Scully, when she finds the data that Mulder got from the senator, which is like a readout from the satellite, She takes it to an expert, and he explains that, there was this signal years ago that was kind of like Morse code. Not exactly, but it was kind of intermittent, and it also turned on when the satellite was looking at the right frequency, so it was kind of the best evidence we've ever had of extraterrestrial life. But this, whatever it is better. It's like something's actually sending a signal, and it kind of explains this up so we have some context for what Mulder's looking for later, and we understand kind of a big deal this is. So it's kind of heartbreaking when they have to run away because the military guys are there, and they take some shots at them. And they have a scene which I can only describe as a commando scene. And what I mean by that is not that there's commandos in it, although they're kind of commando-esque. I'm talking about them driving down the hill, right, down the side of the mountain or whatever it is, and because there's a scene at the Alien Commando where Arnold's truck doesn't work, so he just kind of like pushes it over the edge of this hill and goes through down like past all the trees and kind of darts across the roads and all the rest of it, and it's very rocky. They basically have that scene where this is how they beat the military guys down to the bottom of the mountain so they can get away, because these guys are going to kill them. So we get this rocky scene of them going down. It's a very, like I say, very much like that early scene in Commando. That's what it made me think of anyway. Like, it's all I could think about during the whole scene, which is not a critique or even a positive. It's just, I was thinking of Commando. I like that movie though, so I'm not complaining. He grabs the tape before he goes. He wants to take all the readouts, but that's like, like miles and miles of paper printout. So he grabs the tape from the tape machine, and that's all he's got. But the sad part is, at the end of the episode, when Mulder's listening to the tape, it's all blank, and Scully theorizes that the electrical storms caused by whatever happened the night before, of course, we all know it was aliens, but Scully's being, diplomatic with her wording, might have just erased the tape, rather than necessarily that the aliens intentionally erased the evidence. I'm not sure why they would care, given that we're already beaming this back anyway. I suppose that's the other theory, as to at least why they were there, is they detected that this was the only place that was picking up their signal, so that's why they came here. That would probably stand to reason. Again, what they did to Mulder, other than just make him pass out, maybe that's just a defense mechanism. I don't know. But yeah, it's very bitter at the end, because he's very disillusioned, but he's kind of like, he's still got the fire has been relit, right? As much as he doesn't have the X-Files, as much as the evidence isn't there, although he does end the episode obsessively once Scully's left the scene by putting the tape back in and just listening to it very closely. Like, he's meant to be doing the surveillance again, but instead he's listening to static, just hoping that he'll hear something, that there'll be some proof that he missed. And that's how it ends. But there is a sweet moment before Scully leaves, though, where he is saying, look, I may not have the X-Files anymore, right? But I still have my work, and I still have you, and I still have myself. And I think the look in Scully's face as she's looking up at him as he says, I still have you, it's an interesting thing to read, because it's almost like, for a split second, I thought, does she agree with that statement? And I think she does. Like, I think ultimately she does, but she hadn't really necessarily considered it on those terms. Like, is she still just going to be like a hard ally to Mulder? Like, is this experience maybe giving her a moment of pause where maybe we shouldn't be obsessing into this stuff in the way we were before, or working on it like we were when we were in the X-Files, because perhaps we shouldn't. And I think, obviously, that scene at the start of the episode where she's doing the autopsy in front of the students and she gets kind of caught up for a moment and then starts getting all, theorizing about how, isn't it magical how everyone's experience, everyone's soul, everyone's personality is all contained in this hunk of brain that we're about to cut out. I think her looking at the world that way definitely paints this image of a character who is questioning the reality of everything that she's experienced because of season 1 of the show. When the show started, she was very much a scientist. She was very much facts are facts, proof is proof, science is science, so on, so on. And then over the course of the season, she had those ideas challenged, and those ideas of what the limits were and what known science was were stretched and bent and all these things to the point where she was a bit more open-minded by the end of the show. And I think that scene early on, when she's doing the autopsy, is kind of the hint that even when she's not with Mulder now, she's still questioning things in a different way. She's still thinking about things in a different way because of those experiences. And I think that's why ultimately Mulder, as he puts it, still has Scully. I think she maybe hadn't thought about it in those definitive terms, but ultimately she holds his hand for a second before she leaves the room in a moment of compassion. But at the same time, it's almost like she knows she's leaving him to be obsessive while she goes off and does whatever she's going to do. But it's a really nice little moment that I think, again, paints this camaraderie between the two characters that is very interesting. And the scene that, of course, I've skipped over is the scene with Skinner, where he's chewing out Mulder for ditching his post and going AWOL for a couple days. And Mulder's like, yep, what I did deserves discipline. I agree with that. But, you know, you've got me doing busy work that's pointless. We could have arrested these guys ages ago, but you still got me doing it. And this is where the Smoky Man interjects and tells him that, oh, you're done, Mulder. You're done. And then Skinner, in a bizarre twist of fate here, tells him to get out. Not Mulder. He tells the Smoky Man to get out. Very stern as well. So that takes a minute. Smoky Man doesn't go without a bit of a dramatic exit. He makes a bit of a scene. And then Skinner basically says, you're back on surveillance. Off you go. And Mulder questions why he's not being disciplined. He doesn't really get much of an answer, but Skinner just kind of reiterates, hey, we can't arrest those guys yet. We need more surveillance. Keep doing it. And I thought it was an interesting scene. And I don't know how to interpret this exchange quite yet. I feel like I need to see more of Skinner as a character before I can even begin to gauge this. Because on the one hand, it feels like the moment that the Smoky Man tries to belittle one of his agents, it's almost like Skinner steps in as the tough dad, where he's like, look, he needs to be chewed out, but I'll do the chewing out, not you. Go away. It's almost like in some way he still wants to protect Mulder from the Smoky Man, like he still has some allegiance to the agents that he's in charge of. That's like maybe the first inkling to read it that way, because it's the most obvious thing to take from it. But at the same time, he also makes it very clear that Mulder's to just stay doing the busy work that he was doing. You know, like that's... Like, is he doing that to be vindictive? Is he doing that because he thinks that's keeping Mulder safe? Is he doing that because... I don't know. Like, I feel like I don't have enough information to really nail down an answer here, but it certainly got me thinking, because it was an interesting interaction, and him going against the Smoky Man definitely feels like a different dynamic than we've seen from whenever he's been about some of these upper FBI guys. So very curious, because we've only had a little bit of Skinner in season 1. He was kind of a newer character towards the end. I'm very curious to see how this develops and see where things go from here. And is he ultimately more on Mulder's side but with tough love, or is he someone who's true neutral? Is he someone who's more against Mulder, but in this occasion he's playing politics with the Smoky Man? I don't know. Like, there's an interesting dynamic here for sure, though, and I'm very curious to see where this goes. As the season rolls out. Elsewhere in the episode, I kind of glossed over a lot of Scully's side, where she's guessing the password into Mulder's computer, which turns out to be trust no one. She does a sly little move to get that printout from the other FBI agents who are spying and asking her why she's there. There's some tactics at the airport to sort of lose a tail that's clearly been sent out after her. She actually does a little smart trick where she makes them think she's on a different flight by phoning Mulder's place and leaving kind of an obvious code, if you will, which gets them to think she's going somewhere else before she dips out to Puerto Rico. Yeah, I think this episode is pretty successful at doing a few different things. I think it's successful at making the intrigue of the alien stuff and the idea of like getting messages back from the unknown seems exciting. It seems more definitive in this case because it's just hard evidence that someone was contacting us, even if Mulder doesn't have it after the fact. But we still got it as the audience. But more than that, I think it's really good at reaffirming Mulder's obsession and dedication, as unhealthy as it might be in some ways. The idea that he has been reignited by the end of the episode, he still, don't get me wrong, he still wants the hard evidence, and he clearly still obsessed about getting it at the end. But it's almost like these few months, however long it's been, of not being able to pursue any of this stuff. And because of that, he's probably not had any like big encounters like this. He's not had the sort of thing that he was getting on a semi-recurring basis when he was actually investigating X-Files cases. So having him have that be reignited and having that as a launching pad for season 2, where the characters, at least for now, are still forced to kind of operate outside the FBI system and do it on the hush-hush. I do suspect that'll change sooner rather than later. But yeah, and then the other thing that I think the episode's successful at is the Mulder-Scully relationship, her showing concern from him earlier on, being determined to find him because he might be in trouble, getting him out of harm's way. And it kind of showed you how important she is to him. Like, he probably would have just gotten killed, right? At the research center when those military guys were showing up, she had to almost drag him kicking and screaming out of that place because he kept wanting to look for more evidence and try and grab as much as he could. She had to keep nudging and pulling at him. And I think that shows how important she is to kind of like balancing him out and how he does need that. Like, he may think he just wants to obsess over the stuff that he wants, but you still need someone to tell you when to eat, because you're not going to solve anything if you're dying of starvation. That's a really specific, stupid example of what I mean. But, someone sensible to actually point out where he's almost going to be an enemy to himself by not doing things a certain way. And as she straight up puts it in that scene, evidence is no use if you're dead. We have to go. So, yeah, I think their interactions this episode are solid. It was a really good opener. I think it's probably one of the strongest episodes of the show so far. Like I said, it had a sense of confidence immediately. Now, whether or not that confidence carries over episode to episode as we're doing more Case of the Week stuff, which I imagine we'll be getting to soon, if not in the very next episode, we'll see. I'm not sure, but this definitely felt more confident, like I said. So I'm feeling good about season 2. I'm very intrigued, and I'm definitely into completely unknown territory. I think I saw like a lot of season 1, if not all of season 1, a long time ago, and I'd forgotten just everything about it. This was genuinely like unknown territory. I've never seen a second of X-Files season 2 all the way up to season like 9. Not seen any of those. So this is exciting times for that as well. Let's see how it goes. So thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure. I always appreciate, and we can of course get into some more X-Files in the coming weeks, months, and well, years, because it's a long show. But let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your trouble. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?